The land we bought in Alaska didn't have a house or a place to stay on it. We knew when we were going to build our house, we were going to have a place to stay. We threw around a lot of ideas, trying to figure out what the best way to do this would be. Talked about maybe a travel trailer, tent, or just staying in town renting a place for a while. In the end, we decided on a shipping container cabin. The deciding factor was we could build it here where we were currently living, fill it full of a bunch of stuff, and then ship it up to our property in Alaska. Wasn't sure if this plan was actually going to work, but we decided to give it a try. The first step was to buy a container. At this point, containers were starting to become scarce, but they hadn't gotten too difficult to find. We found a container, had it shipped to the place where we were going to work on it for a couple of months, and then we started the project. We wanted a couple things out of the cabin. First and foremost, we wanted a place for my wife and I to live while we were building the cabin. But secondly, since it was going to be a couple years till I could move up to Alaska, if I wanted to go on a fishing trip with a couple of my friends, I wanted to be able to sleep 3 or 4 of us. So we came up with a plan that would sleep 5, but yet be able to fit a queen-size bed, as well as a little mini kitchen, and a bathroom, and a shower. As far as bathroom, we decided on a composting toilet rather than a regular toilet, and for the shower, we used the smallest shower available at Home Depot. As I studied up on container homes, pretty much everyone agreed you needed to insulate them pretty well. We decided to use 2x2s since the walls didn't need to be structural, but they did need to have a place for insulation. For insulation, we decided to use 2-inch pink foam. A lot of this I was able to find online through Craigslist and get a pretty good deal on. Some of it I had to buy through Home Depot. We built the outside walls and then stood them up inside the container, left enough room so that on top of those walls we could use 2x3s to support the plywood we were going to use. Once we got all the 2x material in place, then we placed our 2-inch foam in between the studs. I just ripped the foam to the right size using my table saw. I made a lot of pink snow in the process. Both my wife and my dad helped out quite a bit throughout this build, and I couldn't have done it without them. Sometimes just having that extra hand makes all the difference. Once we got the 2x material in place, then it was time to choose a wall covering. We decided to go with 3/8-inch ply rather than sheetrock. I was afraid the sheetrock was going to crack during transport, and again, structurally we didn't need anything too thick, so 3/8 fit the bill. It seemed pretty expensive at the time we bought it, but the months that followed, it almost tripled by the time we were done with the project, so it was a good thing we started when we did. During this stage, I also roughed in my kitchen cabinets. That shelf along the wall is where my plumbing ran to the shower and then out of the shipping container. The next step was to prime and then paint the walls. We went with a fairly neutral color. That was totally my wife's choice. I didn't really care. Once we got the walls and the cabinets painted, then we put in some snap-in flooring from the home improvement store. Here you can see the bedding areas starting to take shape. I was fortunate because there was an anchor for my hanging bunk right where it needed to be. That's just some 1/4-inch cable, plenty strong enough. You can see where the queen bed will slide out. This allows us to have a queen bed at night but have functional space during the day. I got this idea from online, of course. For the kitchen table, I was able to get some locking hinges. Again, this allowed us to have a kitchen table when we needed it and space when we didn't. In an 8x20 cabin, space is a premium. Here the composting toilet starts to take shape. It's a pretty simple idea. A bucket, a urine diverter, and a couple of fans. It's actually worked way better than we ever anticipated. Not having to worry about a septic system or make those long cold runs to the outhouse has been pretty nice. I'd recommend you give it a try if you're thinking about it. With that out of the way, we started work on the upper and lower cabinets. The upper cabinets actually are really important. Seems like there's always mice around Alaska. Having the cabinets hung up on the wall gives you a place to put food where they really can't get to. So far, this idea has also worked really well for us. I'm sure at some point we might find out differently, but that remains to be seen. We put in a sink, some drawers, a place for a refrigerator, and then a range that we got out of an old motorhome. Pretty compact, but you have everything you need, all in about a 6-foot space. The countertop finish is just fiberglass with a polyurethane stain to protect it. Next, we finished out the pull-out queen bed. We put a nice long drawer, about 6 feet long, underneath the far side. Not easy to get to, but again, every inch of space needed to be utilized. All of the bunks I made so that they could fold out of the way when they're not in use. The 2 bunks on the left will probably use that area for closet space when it's just my wife and I. But when we have extra guests, it'll be a place for them to sleep. Next, we bought some foam mattresses, tried out a couple on the other bunks before we decided on which one to get for the queen bed. Next, we finished up the outside. The door and the kitchen window are by the container doors. We didn't want to put any holes in the container prior to shipping. We weren't sure the shipping company would accept it that way. For lights in the cabin, I used 12-volt lighting throughout. Bought a couple of used solar panels and then an all-in-one inverter from Watts 24/7. We can run a few hours of lights off of just one 12-volt battery. With everything completed, now it was just time to load up the container to ship it. It pretty much costs the same to ship a full or an empty container, so you may as well use the space. As you can see, a little bit of recreation and a little bit of work went into this load out. I tried to think of all the tools and necessities that I might need. I actually have been surprised by how much of the stuff I packed I've used to this point in my project. With everything loaded in the cabin, the next step was to hire a crane to set it on the semi-trailer. Trying to arrange for a crane and a semi to show up in the same place at the same time wasn't as easy as I thought it might be, but in the end it all worked out. Both the crane operator and the driver were great, and before long we had it on the semi-trailer and ready to ship. Fast forward about 3 weeks, and the container was in Alaska. During this time, we were moving a lot of dirt around our property, so we had all the equipment we needed to set that container in place. It actually went remarkably smoothly. And before we knew it, we had a cabin on our own little piece of Alaska. This little cabin has been just what we needed for my wife and I on all our visits to our property. In the first test of the cabin, 5 of us slept in it for a week while we were fishing. Has to be the right people, but it worked just fine.